it's 2025. I don't agree. Listen, you're going to be hard pressed to convince this guy that technical issues are keeping a school district from live streaming.
Hi, everyone. This is Bryce Fiddler with Carolina's Academic Leadership Network. Today, we are bringing you a new episode of the Education Roundtable, a brand new podcast series from our team here at Callan. And to kick things off, we have a very special guest with us today. I'm excited to be joined by Senator Jeff Zell, representing District 36 in South Carolina. Prior to his Senate election this past November, Jeff served on the Sumter County School Board, to which he was elected in 2022. As someone who has worked with Jeff through Callan, I will tell you that he did and continues to do outstanding work for students and our schools, and we are so excited to be speaking with him here today. So with that, Jeff, how are you? And thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I know we've tried to make this happen for some time now. The Senate schedule is a bit chaotic and very demanding, and so I'm just fortunate and thankful that we were able to speak to one another in this capacity.
Absolutely, and there's a lot we can dive into. And for our listeners here, we're recording this at a pretty exciting time. I mean, this is the beginning of South Carolina's legislative session. This is, in fact, day two, and so there's a lot of great work to be done in the next coming months. But before we dive into that, I want to talk a little bit about your sort of early career in public office and how you got started in school board. So what motivated you originally to want to run for school board, and what were some of the issues that you were seeing in education?
Well, to back up a little bit from that, I'm a 20-year Air Force retiree. I retired as a Master Sergeant, which is the highest tier of the enlisted ranks, but it's the lowest enlisted rank of the highest tier, if that makes sense. And so I had some growth I could have pursued. I wasn't willing to do that, seeing how the military, the direction it was going. I felt like I couldn't necessarily do what my calling was. And so I felt, compelled to do something else. So with that, as I was sort of transitioning from the Air Force into civilian capacity, figuring out where it is I wanted to go, what is it I wanted to do, sort of the impact that I wanted to make. The school board election, campaign season sort of popped up out of nowhere, and it was just almost sort of like an answered prayers. And so it felt like an opportunity to really show up, stand up, and speak for the people that had big concerns. Well, that happened, and I won my election pretty handily in 2022. And I spent the next 2 years trying to figure out how and what it is that I needed to know and how and what I needed to change or at least be a part of. And that's where y'all come in. That's where Callan, Carolina's Academic Leadership Network, stood up. It was a collection of, and I'm sure you're going to brief this, it was a collection of very interested people in public education and education in its entirety. That banded around one sort of core principle, and that is that achievement must be the foundation and the target of everything that we do. And that isn't to say that we don't understand and don't calculate into our formulas the challenges that people face with economic immobility and lack of, really just sort of generational lack of education, which translates into generational lack of opportunities. And so it creates, over time, these sort of opportunity deserts, if you will, and people just get stuck. And I'm trying to unstuck a lot of these, our neighbors, our younger neighbors. And so that's a long way to say, but that's where my heart is, and that's what motivated me to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And you know better than anyone else that running for and serving on school board can be an extremely challenging, daunting, and thankless job. I mean, school board
Absolutely.
members are basically tasked with running districts, which are in effect they're like companies in a way, and oftentimes they are among the largest employers in a county with thousands of students and budgets that can be in the tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And we've seen a lot of parents
Right.
that have a lot of great ideas but haven't, no previous governance experience that come into these roles, and that's why we're so dedicated to making sure they have all the support that they
That's right.
need so that we can do a lot of the heavy lifting for them so that they can go out and actually
Sure.
achieve the things
Yes.
that they ran on. So
Thank you.
you alluded to
Likewise.
this just a little bit, but I wanted to sort of give you an opportunity if there was anything else you wanted to share. Specifically in the beginning and as you were learning and coming on board, what early obstacles did you face as a newly elected school board member, and how did you persevere through them and find solutions?
Okay. Well, very good question, my friend. First and foremost, just sort of the institutional knowledge um, was a very tall hill to climb, simply because I had no real educational background. I mean, I just finished my degree last year, or actually last January. I completed my bachelor's degree after 44 years of life, and so little bit of a different path. But I didn't have the institutional knowledge within the system to be able to really be effective. I was sort of the general guy on off the street that sees the concern, sees the sort of the problems and the results in the community, in the society, in our professions and economy and whatnot. But I couldn't discern the why, right? I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't discern the reason to the sort of detrimental, harmful results, and so I really had to like dig in. I essentially had to learn, and this is sort of my behavior, and I think you know me well enough where one thing I don't lack is energy, and so I lack a lot of things, but energy isn't one of them. And so I decided that I was going to run towards broadening my knowledge base as much as I possibly could. And what that meant is I had to learn essentially what the superintendent's job is, what the board chairman and chairwoman are supposed to do, what committee leaders are supposed to do, what the citizen in the family is supposed to do and their role in it. And what I learned is basically, really in a general sense, and this isn't to impugn a lot of good people in public education, and believe me, they're everywhere. There's a lot of great people, but they're being stifled, and that's another subject we can talk about in the future. However, it really was knowledge, and
Mm-hmm.
so I ran hard at that. I tried to learn as many of the jobs that sort of supported a school board and figure out what they were supposed to do. And I knew once I learned, at least in a general sense, what their job was and what their responsibilities was, then I could do my job better. And that's where Callan came, School Board Association, and I will tell you, and they're probably going to watch this podcast, and I'm very, very good with that, because I would love to have a conversation with them. Where do we go forward, right? I think they may be a bit skeptical of my new title, which I don't want them to be. I want, their partners in this too. But we have to be real candidly honest with one another about what our aim is and what our goal is, and to work to those ends. And if we don't, well, then that's where we're going to have some disagreements, and that's fine. We can do that. But we need to get all hands on deck. We need all be extremely knowledgeable and seek out those training opportunities for school board members, and with organizations like Callan and others, and just sort of take in as much as we can so that we can put out the best policy, the best way forward.
All right, so now we can fast forward a little bit to today and talk about your experience, not only running for the Senate, but what you're excited to accomplish this year
All
and
right.
beyond. So, with
Sure.
that, tell me a little bit about your experience running for Senate as a candidate. What was that process like? Challenges you faced? Similarly, how did you overcome those? Anything that you leveraged, previously having served in
Yeah.
office that you brought into this new role?
Okay, well, I'd be happy to, and I will tell you, a lot of it felt haphazard. I mean, I think if you ask any sort of freshman legislator, running for a office this great, this high level, there is a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainties, and uh, a lot of a lot of skepticism. I'll leave it at that, about folks, thinking, are you really viable? Do you have the, sort of mechanics in place like fundraising? Do you have the network, the door knocking network? All the things that go into campaigning. And what, because I mean, essentially, I had no real plans of running for this office, at least not this early. And an opportunity came open. We saw that, and I know that, listen, I'm trying to be neutral here, but I'm just going to be honest because they were dishonest. My opponents were pretty dishonest about who I was and who I am. And, so I sort of clear the record. I saw, to be honest, digging into the former administration's output, outcomes, efforts. There was almost nothing there. I mean, this you would think that sitting in an occupying an office for over a decade, that you would have some accomplishments to really to ring that bell come election time, and there was very little. So it just felt like there was just a lot of malaise and neglect from the former senator. And that's not what this senator is going to do. I promise you that. So, but to answer the question more formally, a lot of the big challenges were, just we were what it felt like we were pushing a boulder uphill. We were fighting against a well-oiled, well-funded machine, and I believe me, I see it everywhere in the halls. Great people, of course, but there's a system here that sort of it's been encapsulated um, internally, whether it's deliberate or not, and I'm sure there was to some degree over the years. But it's almost impenetrable. Meaning, if you're an insider, well, you got great advantage, right? You'll have people from all over the political aisle that are interested in keeping you elected and keeping the other guy unelected, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Where,
what are some of your top priorities that you hope to see accomplished in the session?
Yeah, well, what's great about my top priorities, it just so happens to be the top priorities of the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader, and I believe the Minority Leader. I mean, there seems to be a lot of interest in sort of the non-sexy, more structural sort of governing, right? I think a lot of the big sort of national social issues have been largely sort of you know, uh, put to rest for at least the time being. I don't think you're going to see a lot of those things. You're going to see a lot of education, and I don't know what it looks like, but there's going to be a heavy effort in really looking at opening up school choice, looking at I know this is a contentious issue, obviously, because it's been so partisanly, if that's a word, so divided up into segments. Education has that there's a lot of competing interests and very vehement competing interests, and so getting those people to the table and have be willing to sort of compromise on some things. I think it is going to be the way how we get things done. We do have a super majority in the Senate now. And just to be just completely frank, I'm in that supermajority, and there's going to be value to that, and it's going to be very beneficial to the folks and my friends and colleagues in the super minority party that is going to benefit them from working with me and other freshmen, because we want the same things. We want better schools. We want better roads. We want better healthcare systems.
Hmm.
All these things can be done, but we can't do them in silos. And so those are the things I think you're going to see a lot of effort come out of that building over there that I'm going to be very, very happy about and advocating for. But the devil, Bryce, is always in the details, as you know. And so I'm going to be, my team and I are going to be heavily looking into the nuances of these bills to make sure that they have the best chance of doing the thing they're supposed to do, and not, just continue kicking the can down the road, or, spending taxpayer money with no real result.
Yeah.
So, one last thing I'll tell you, and I'll just add to this, and this is just a sort of a shot across the bow. Two things can coexist at the same time. One, I am very pro public education, but it needs heavy, heavy reform. It needs to work for the communities it serves. Secondarily, I just signed on a resolution to amend the Constitution of South Carolina with Senator Lieber, who filed some legislation to amend the Constitution to remove the Blaine Amendment language
Mm.
from it. And the reason why, and I've been a strong advocate for this for some time, because in my uh, academic journey, I spent much of it on education, particularly in South Carolina, learning, reading about policy. I have college papers written on it, things like that. I just wanted to really delve into it and understand it. But with the Blaine Amendment, if you're aware, and I know that you are because we've spoken about this. I do believe, regardless of the composition of the Supreme Court, regardless of for the most part, the composition of the General Assembly, any effort we make at this point to sort of open up school choice for our families, our South Carolinian families and their children, is going to be to some degree vulnerable why as that language exists. I mean, so it's just a one chief justice, and I'm saying this loosely, of course. This isn't it's a general statement, obviously, but we're one chief justice swap away from illegal, unconstitutionality, and that's not a favorable place to be. That's not a strong place to be. That leaves our South Carolinian families that rely on these sort of these alternative education programs and funding, heavily relying on them, they are at risk as long as that language is in the Constitution. So I don't know if we'll see much movement on that simply because I'm not sure. I'm still gauging where sort of the rest of the Senate is on this.
Hmm.
There's not been much talk about it. That doesn't mean that we won't have great debates on it in the future, but I think at this point, for me, it's more of a get it into the conversation, and then we'll take it from there. But I don't see any big movement on that just because it is a kind of a contentious issue. But again, as long as that language is there, we're vulnerable. Public ed and alternative education programs are vulnerable.
Um, Last one, and this is something that I think we've even talked about a little bit about, Callan, is school board live streaming. So I think
Oh yeah.
for two sessions in a row now, there have been proposals that would have required all public school districts in the state to live stream their meetings. Most of them do this already. Some research on that front has shown that generally school boards do this, but there's a handful that don't, either from technical issues or from otherwise. Do you have any thoughts on sort of the necessity of live streaming, the transparency that it
I
creates,
do.
access
That's
to meetings, all of that?
yes. Well, thank you for that question, Mr. Fielder. I want you to know that I've recently co-sponsored a bill in the Senate, obviously the Senate. Can't really co-sponsor one in the House, but S77, which addresses this particular issue. It has some pretty big name support. Senator Hembry and Senator Grooms have also, I believe this is Senator Hembry's legislation, and it essentially does that. It requires school board meetings. First of all, Bryce, it's 2025. I don't agree. Listen, you're going to be hard pressed to convince this guy that technical issues are keeping a school district from live streaming. I think there's probably some excuses in there that could be easily overcome. This bill would fix that. I think what it does also is it forces, it puts the public, because it is the document, it's a public document. That video streaming is an archive of public, the work of it's government work, it's the people's business, and it should be treated with FOIA. It should be treated with archive requirements, things like that, and that's what this bill does. And so there'll be a debate on it, I'm sure. I don't see much resistance to it, from my opinion. But again, I'm new. There's always competing interests. But I know that I'm certainly all in favor for this. And one thing I want to go back to real quick, you mentioned earlier in public education that that in some places, K-12 public education is the predominant expenditure in county government, and you're absolutely right. There, we have it's. And don't quote me on this one, but I do believe the Sumter School Districts it may be the largest employer in the county, and it's also the by far the greatest funded and appropriated funded entity in county government by far. Sumter was 158 million last year. It did not receive millage increases, and I would have been I was absolutely very much publicly in favor of no millages. I mean, and the reason was looking back at the archive, the history, we were finding that and this may be a statewide issue that we might need to address as well, and certainly that's on the forefront of my mind. But a lot of these, what I'm seeing, and at least in my district, uh, general fund balances are increasing year over year significantly in these schools, right? In these school districts, and it's largely some system issues. Much of that money comes from the student body population formula comparative to teacher requirements to that student body formula, population formula, and we have the students, we don't have the teachers, we get the money, we can't expend it on anything, so it goes into the fund balance every year. Sumter just reported $10 million increase in their fund balance. So that I think that brings them about 65, I don't know, 65 million plus when they're only required to keep, several months of I think it's actually 1 month of operating costs, which is I think that's about $10 million dollars or something like that. So it's so essentially what's happening is, and this isn't to say these school districts don't need the money, but they're stockpiling dollars. They're stockpiling tax dollars. So that's exactly what's happening. And whether it's intentional or not is really sort of not the point. The point is that the taxpayer is paying for these services and not getting the results they should expect. But I will tell you, I do believe that there are great people in this space on both sides. I think most people, as long as they're willing to act and operate and deal with us and myself in good faith, we may disagree on the policy solution, but if we act in good faith and always our target is at an educated South Carolinian, I think that we can do business, and we have the opportunity now in front of us that we may have never had in this state, and every voice matters. So as long as folks are willing to act in good faith, they have a seat at my table, and so I just want to say thank you for all your efforts. What you continue to do for public education for the families and children of South Carolina.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to speak with you today. Best of luck in the legislative session and all the great things that you're going to accomplish. And thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day.